it might be 2025 all over again because the Browns are talking about a quarterback competition. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. It feels like we're heading for another quarterback competition for the Browns' starting job. Plus, I expect the Browns to still add to the position, and Andrew Berry is keeping all options open when it comes to addressing the quarterback role. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, and that is all thanks to you. I'm here in Indy. We heard from Andrew Berry today on Tuesday. Todd Monken's set to speak on Wednesday, and we'll pick his brain, I'm sure, about all things quarterback competition related and quarterback related without question. But specific to Berry's answers today, in classic Andrew Berry fashion, he kept things very vague. He kept things very open-ended. There was a lot of TBDs sort of thrown out by him. But what I think is interesting is that the word competition and quarterback competition was a constant theme and message from him throughout his 15 or so minutes that he was up at the podium. And then it continued in the little scrum with the local media that he had off in the corner. That is a common theme right now from this team, that it's going to be an open competition. And so the idea that like anybody could sit here today and say, I know Shedeur Sanders is going to be the starter, or I know Deshaun Watson is going to be the starter, or I know Malik Willis is going to be the starter. Like there's just no clear indication one way or another that's going to be any of those guys at this stage. We don't know. I think it's going to be probably one of the names that I mentioned, or some mystery person that we haven't gotten to yet. But I like there's no knowing for sure who it's going to be, because it sounds like they're willing to do a repeat of last year and let the players kind of decide this thing on the field. And I want to play you a clip here from Berry. This was specifically him asked about Deshaun and his potential opportunity to start. But he was also asked about Shedeur and said something very similar. Like, he was basically, one of the first questions he was asked was about Shedeur versus Deshaun and who's going to be the starter between those two. And he said, he went back to his blanket statement of it's an open competition. But then later on in the press conference, this is what he said specific to Deshaun and how he's doing in his role or potential opportunity in this competition.
I think any player on our roster we would want to compete. Like, we believe in competition at every spot. That's no different than quarterback. Deshaun's been working really hard. He's been working his tail off, and like I said, we're excited to get going in April with all of our players across the roster, because competition is something that we really believe in.
So you heard him say competition at least 2 times there. Maybe it was even 3 times in that clip. And so that's the common theme here. Like they're approaching this thing as if they know they don't have a hard and fast solution at their disposal this offseason. I guess maybe the one option would be you sign Malik Willis because you think he is that guy. But even that feels like something that you would do with some risk, because it's a guy who's only started 6 games in his NFL career and doesn't have a large sample size to kind of go off of, and you're sort of taking a chance with that too. And like as I think more and more about it, and I think more and more about what Andrew Berry said today about the competition piece, like saying it's a competition is the thing that is the answer you give when you know you don't have that position figured out yet. And so you're basically keeping it open-ended to like, we don't know exactly what our plans are going to be. Free agency is going to come first, then the draft. He talked about drafting another one, which we'll get to. And depending on who we add and what we do, it's up for grabs. If you have a franchise quarterback, you're obviously not talking like that. And so that to me feels like, in a way, the Browns are kind of conceding that they know this year's going to be a little bit of a project, a little bit of a feeling out, and they're going to test some things out with different guys to figure out what is who maybe the best option is, or if there's anything left in the Deshaun Watson tank, or if there's more in the Shedeur Sanders tank. That's how it feels like this thing's going to go, where you could see multiple guys start this year. If things start great for one and then they struggle, maybe they pivot to the other one. That's, I think, where this thing sort of sits right now. And it is kind of where my mind goes, because it just feels like all options or all roads lead back to you're better off kind of finding out what you have what you have left in the current guys, or what more you have in the current guys, before you go spend on a big name free agent, or draft somebody that you think could be the guy at a higher draft value. And I don't think they're going to do that anyway at 6. But those things are still on the table. And that was the other part of the conversation that I want to get to, because again, the TBD answers, the open competition stuff, like Barry is very much speaking in generalizations, and he's speaking very broadly about things. He's not giving anything away. He's not really saying one way or another how the quarterback competition is going to go. He's not committing to anything. And again, it's the place you speak from when you know that is still very much a question mark and something that you're looking for answers for. So listen, I thought it was some pretty telling stuff that's the approach they're taking. I also, felt like there's reason to believe that he thinks it could come down to either the guys that we talked about that are currently in the room. He even mentioned Dillon Gabriel by name as somebody that isn't forgotten about within the organization, even if he's forgotten about externally. So right now, I don't know that we can definitively say who it's going to be, because Barry made it known. He's not putting a timeline on making a decision. He's certainly not putting a timeline on how long the competition could go. He even said he's comfortable with it stringing or going into training camp, if that's how it plays out. And so along those lines, as we continue talking quarterbacks here and what Andrew Barry had to say about it, I still maintain that they're going to add somebody to that room. And in the name of being very vague, Andrew Barry also kept it very open-ended when it comes to how they will add a quarterback. I got another clip for you. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where HomeChef comes in. HomeChef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users with other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. In my house, dinner is probably the hardest meal of the day. My wife changes her mind sometimes. She just isn't feeling certain things. But Home Chef offers 30 or over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. And more importantly, it saves time and money. Home Chef customers save an average of $86 per month on groceries. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. You must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. Today's show also brought to you by FanDuel. Did you ever want to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you a chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. You just use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot at a trip to the NBA Finals for 2. That's right, flights, tickets, and the whole experience for 2. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about teams that could make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. Maybe you think the Cavs are that team, and honestly, you might be right. And if you're feeling bold about the Cavs' chances, well, right now, not only could you pick your pick cash, but it could also send you on a trip to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future bet and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so I got another clip here for you in relation to the quarterback conversation and the competition part of this. And I'll give you at the end of this here, like, what I think makes the most sense for how the Browns handle the quarterback room this year. And I kind of alluded to it a little bit in the first segment. But when it comes to adding to the room, which is going to happen, I still maintain there's no chance that this team's going to start the season with 3 quarterbacks on the roster that Todd Monken just had flat out no say in selecting and picking and bringing here. And that's not to say he doesn't like them or he doesn't want to work with them or he doesn't want to help develop Shedeur. I'm just saying, like, they're going to add a quarterback in some capacity. It's just a matter of how or where or whatever. Option number 1 is free agency. That's obviously coming up in a couple weeks in March. and it's going to be an opportunity to go out and try to make a big splash potentially. Andrew Berry talked about being more aggressive this year in free agency. I'm going to talk about that on Wednesday's show a little bit more, like what that could look like. But he mentioned having some flexibility to do some things. And so maybe they do they go for the big fish of Malik Willis that's out there this offseason. There's a reason why I don't know that that's going to happen, but I do think it's maybe on the table. And we've heard some of the rumors of that because there's just not enough teams. And this is maybe the biggest piece. The number of teams that are potentially interested in quarterbacks that could go get Malik Willis is minimal. Like, I don't think the Vikings, maybe the Vikings get involved, I don't know, but it sounds like they have other options when it comes to quarterbacks. I've seen them linked to Kyler Murray, but these quarterbacks are all going to change hands. Only one can end up at one place. The Dolphins are trying to get away from Tua potentially. They might be interested. The Cardinals might be interested once they move off of Kyler Murray. And then it's the Browns. There's really only like 3 or 4 teams that like feel like they're legitimately in the mix for somebody like Malik Willis, which is why it feels like it could be a possibility. But ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns draft a quarterback either. And Barry talked about that as well. The idea of I think it's Bill Parcells saying of like, if you don't, you keep drafting it, or whoever it was, who you keep drafting a quarterback until you have one, and you might as well just keep using the resources on it. Andrew Barry's a subscriber of that. This is what he had to say about drafting a quarterback.
I don't see a problem with that. It's the most important position. We wouldn't talk about it any differently if we were drafting an O lineman or a D lineman or something along those lines. I don't think that you can invest in it enough.
So basically saying there that he's not opposed to drafting another quarterback this year, despite the fact that they drafted 2 last year and that it is on the table. Now, what I will say is he also added at one point during the press conference that he doesn't envision, he said to be determined, that phrase was thrown around a lot as well, on how much time and resources and all that they will spend on the quarterbacks this offseason. Last year, we know they traveled to a lot of pro days. Kevin Stefanski went with them. Tom Munkin, what's his travel schedule going to be like? Like, how much are they actually scouting these guys? He mentioned it being a different class. He mentioned it being a different year. And so there's no guarantee that they're going to invest as much time into scouting all those guys because the class is different. And I think when he says that, it's kind of a suggestion that like the class isn't quite as strong either. And so understanding that, it does feel like, again, all roads lead back to this being a Shedeur Sanders or Deshaun Watson sort of outcome when push comes to shove. Listen, I could be wrong, and they could sign a veteran that they think is the starter. Maybe they do go get Malik Willis. But again, I think the fact that where the Browns are at in terms of like their rebuild that they're in here, in terms of what this thing kind of looks like in terms of the market and who's actually out there and the options in the draft that are available, it just doesn't feel like there's anybody that's going to be able to come in, unless it's Malik Willis, that you feel like is a bona fide, this guy's our starter that we're going to get. And even with Malik Willis, like I said, it's a guesstimate. It's still sort of a wait and see because he has only played so much in this league and there's not a big sample size of games right now. So to me, it just feels like 2026 is already setting up based on the comments from Andrew Berry today and talking about competition to be sort of let's put the balls out there and let's see who wins the job. And if that means we get a chance to really scout and see what Shedeur Sanders brings to the table more, great. If it means that we get one last gasp of air with Deshaun Watson and see if there's anything left there, I mean, personally, not so great for me because I think that's kind of a waste of time. But if that's what they want, how they want to handle it, it just doesn't feel like the options are so grand that they have any other choice. Like this kind of feels like a gap year of the quarterback position, and they're just going to figure it out with whatever sort of quarterback room they throw together, kind of like last year, have a competition, and then they'll figure it out in 2027 on a larger scale. That's where it feels like this thing is trending. But I maintain that they're going to add someone, and it might be another project because like Andrew Berry said, I do believe him when he says like they're always trying to fix the quarterback position. When they took the big swing they took on Deshaun, I think it was because they're always trying to improve that position. I believe that. And so I could see them drafting one. That's another project for Todd Monken to get his hands on. But again, if you do that, that then leads you back to, because if you're not getting Fernando Mendoza, pretty much everybody after that is like you need patience for them in this class. And so if you go that route, it still sort of points to Shedeur and Deshaun are the options. Dillon Gabriel, who again he brought up as somebody who shouldn't be forgotten about, and you see who wins the job, and then next season's kind of all about evaluating that position further. Maybe you end up with a guy, maybe you don't. But that's where, to me, it feels like this thing is heading. As you hear Andrew Berry talk about open competition and potentially drafting a quarterback, drafting a quarterback, if it's not Fernando Mendoza, doesn't necessarily equate to we have our starter. And signing Malik Willis might be the one thing that does, but even that is a risk. And I don't know that this team is in position where it's like, this is the guy that we're going to bank on, who has, a handful of starts in his NFL career to this point. That was a lot of what was said about the quarterback stuff. I got plenty more from Andrew Berry, though, on Tuesday that we will talk about on Wednesday's episode of the Locked On Browns podcast. So make sure you stay locked in. Make sure you're an everydayer, and you check it out first. Make it your first listen every single day at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure that you join the Everydayer Club. If you never miss an episode, it's your chance for $5 a month to get the show ad-free on the audio side, members-only Discord access, and much, much more. Also, keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs and Locked On Guardians. Plenty more to come from the Combine on Wednesday and throughout the rest of the week. Thanks for listening to the Locked On Browns podcast.